something a bit different for this video. I'm going to talk about a music video, because I think this particular music video for the song Flowers by Miley Cyrus has so much psychological and cultural information packed into it, largely unintentionally by the way, that I felt compelled to unpack it all. The song itself is interesting enough to talk about in this regard, but in the music video I found there was much more to say. So let's get into all that, and discuss what this piece of media says about our modern Western world. To set the context, in summary, the song is about coping with a breakup. Miley Cyrus expressing through the lyrics that, after an initial bout of sadness from that breakup, she's come to the realization that she's actually content about it, because many of the things her romantic partner did for her, she can do for herself. Buying her flowers, for example. This may or may not all sound reasonable enough, depending on your perspective, and the song is catchy and enjoyable. But mere millimeters below the surface, the content has a rather more complicated nature to it. The music video is overflowing with overt, individualist messaging, communicating many things at many levels of complexity within this framing. The song implicitly promotes the idea that your identity should not be contingent on someone else, and you don't have to find fulfillment through another person, but can find it internally first, to the furthest extent possible, or perhaps as the ultimate achievement. Parts of this are good to promote, to a certain extent. However, it's an incomplete message, which doesn't account for other human needs, and doesn't account for some of the specific requirements people generally have to begin to feel fulfilled and happy. Those being sharing one's time and the psychological burden of the world with other people. The fact that these basic needs are so forthrightly dismissed in this song is, on one hand, a typical expression of the cry of anguish masked as empowerment these types of songs often contain. It's a way of screaming one's frustration into the world, allowing the anger to give a sense of strength, motivation, and ideological certainty. On the other hand, the video, in the context of broader social trends, is indicative of the extreme atomization of modern society, the pathologized Western ideals of individualism. The lines "say things you don't understand" and "I can love me better than you can" imply that Miley is not merely suggesting that opting to be alone is a compromise because the relationship she was in wasn't working, but rather that she will actually be more complete alone than partnered with another person, because she can facilitate her own needs better than another person ever could, or at least this specific hypothetical person to whom the song refers. The music video is almost weirdly post-apocalyptic, with, aside from a couple of brief shots of busy traffic, no signs of any other people at all on Earth. Miley Cyrus being the only one, and dancing around joyously in that solitude. It has an eeriness to it. She poses seductively in her underwear, clearly as a way to display to the audience what her former partner is missing, and for the normal reasons of enticing the audience with sex appeal, and just making for a stylized video. But there's further meaning to those shots, that being that she's posing for herself, displaying her form for no one's enjoyment but her own. Eventually, the action moves to show shots of Miley happily dancing around her empty house, and dancing outside, and on top of her roof. With these images, there's a real effort to celebrate the solitude, the atomization of people. The whole video is framed as a celebration of self-satisfaction and isolation. It's an inadvertent propaganda piece for it. Self-reliance is a good muscle to build, providing it's not overworked, so this notion of not needing anyone but yourself has a certain amount of psychological utility, and provides some sort of consolation for when other people let you down, and you feel you can't rely on them. There's that side to it, and there's also a rather Randian side to it, with its radical individualist overtones, although none of the acknowledgement Rand gave for the personal value meaningful relationships with other people provide. It's a romanticization of radical individualism, a call for the pursuit of self-interest, an exaggeration of the power of self-fulfillment. It's a fantasy, a fallacy, because ultimately it's a form of lying to oneself about basic human needs. There may be an element of quirky sassiness to a young woman dancing around alone in an empty house, singing about how she can talk to herself for hours, but there comes a point where talking to yourself for hours in an empty, cavernous home just becomes a bit pathetic and sad. It's less rockstar girl boss and more mad old cat lady. It seems like some people genuinely are content in their own company long term, but those whose experience isn't at least enhanced by company some of the time, I think are pretty rare, and those who genuinely don't feel they need anyone at all and aren't affected in the slightest negatively by such extreme isolation are possibly psychopaths. Another thing that is prominently implicit in the messaging of the music video is the promotion of the attainment of economic success, of riches basically. The merits of that on its own form a separate topic of debate, but regarding the way that messaging relates to this music video, the video's framing of the indulgence in riches could arguably be said to contribute to or be reminiscent of an obliviousness found in segments of broader culture to the communal benefits of that kind of individual aspiration. Generally, that ethic tends to be framed as a total matter of self-interest, and through the constant cycle of images of solitude in this music video, the echoes of that rhetoric come through the song. It's all about one's own needs and desires, in isolation from the broader world. But nested in the actual ethics of the economic system which promotes this individual productivity and attainment is something beneficial to the collective, as the individual productivity maintains and builds on the structures which allow for individuals to thrive. And this brings more material comfort and prosperity to their society, expanding infrastructure and generating wealth for the community, driving markets to produce beneficial products, etc. So the message of purely personally contained success, subtly signalled at in this music video fantasy world, is fallacious. Your economic success and attainment are only allowed for by the participation of other people within that system in the first place. The over-the-top individualist messaging doesn't account for the whole picture. Of course, it's not really trying to. It's just a pop song, and is more emotion-driven than intellectual, obviously, so we can't condemn it for that too much. We should bear in mind that this music video only provides a snapshot of a particular frame of mind brought on by an upsetting emotional experience, and doesn't necessarily intend to imply that you don't need any people at all in your life to be content. But the music video does create a fairly elaborate narrative, for what it is, and ultimately does imply that all you need is yourself to be content. Whether or not the people who produced it would personally endorse that sentiment, whether or not Miley Cyrus would actually prescribe that lifestyle. But we can discuss and critique the broader social messaging the song parrots on this topic, while acknowledging all that. While this song, I'd argue, communicates a lot of personal psychological confusion framed from one particular subjective perspective, and broader directions for how to navigate interpersonal relationships, it is also fairly prominently indicative of the stage of wider cultural confusion we're in at the moment. There are signs everywhere in this music video of our culture being in an infantile stage currently. The attitude contained in the messaging is arguably quite teenage, although there is another element to the whole thing, which may mean the song is more complete and authentic to a certain minority. These showbiz stars like Miley Cyrus do live, to most people, a rather unrelatable alien lifestyle. So it is possible they can be more satisfied alone than the average person, or find it harder to remain satisfied long term with a partner due to certain particulars of that lifestyle, facilitating certain states of mind, such as having very broad options. Or perhaps because of their circumstances and personality types, the way their personalities have been shaped by their opulent, high-powered world, they are less satisfied by personal relationships than the average person. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. I'm just throwing out suggestions. But if any of that is the case for these people, it leads to an example of how the cultural conversation becomes confused and polluted for the majority by this showbiz monarchy, because most people don't have that lifestyle. The reach of these powerful showbiz people's personal messages, which may be inappropriate or not translate to the average person, are magnified through media dominance. The music video primarily takes place in what looks like a wealthy part of LA, in a desert of glitz and wealth and hedonism. Things all implicitly glorified by their association to the subject matter of the song here. Returning to the topic of wealth, there's the implicit message that money is more important than love and human connection. This message is pretty ingrained. The entire music video is saturated with signs of wealth. That's the entire stylistic palette on display, with no deviation to anything else. As Miley walks towards her mansion, sporting a gold Trumpian Empress look, the song starts with the lines, "We were good, we were gold, the kind of dream that can't be sold." Now, it's possibly a bit over the top to scrutinise this one line to this degree, but let's do it anyway. This is the first instance in the song of equating material wealth with human connection, by describing the dynamic between two people as gold. It's a small and perhaps seemingly insignificant detail, which I don't think intentionally contains the message I'm pointing out here, but rather perhaps just shows indication of a mindset. It's so ingrained in the world of the song that it maybe shapes the language of it. I don't know, maybe that's all a bit much, but it's fun to dig into these things and investigate. Now, moving away to a new area of psychological markers in the music video. Markers indicative of the longing for paradise, of the aspiration to climb the divine ladder and escape all below. Much of the video takes place to a backdrop of what is implied to be Miley's mansion, so there's no pretense at making her a grounded, relatable, humble character for this music video. She's a glorified superhero, an overwoman, powerful, dominant, self-assured and accomplished, a titan of her world. But what else do these aesthetics communicate? That the cultural ideal, the path to fulfillment, is to be found through pursuing wealth and material possessions, flaunting these gains in the typical braggadocious music video way to show that you've won the game of social hierarchy. You've climbed to the top and there's nothing left to achieve. You can retire to your isolated mansion and dance alone until your last days. No other people are needed, no human connection, no ground level community. None of the things which keep you human yourself are required at this point. The ideal being strived for in the subconscious of this music video is the ascension to the post-human realm, where you can pick and choose your human traits, doing away with those which are inconvenient and impede your enjoyment of material hedonism, or cause you to feel emotional pain. It's an ancient theme deeply ingrained in the subconscious of our culture. It's the aspiration to become a god, essentially, and that's what's encapsulated in the ethic of economic prosperity and ladder climbing. There's an abstract ethic which underlies all of that. It's a need to conquer nature and rise above death's reach. To reiterate, most of the subtext I've excavated here is almost certainly not intentionally coded into this music video. It's simply generated as an inadvertent consequence of the people who collaborated on it, existing in a certain cultural context, among other connected factors. But it can be interesting to closely examine pieces of media like this music video, to expose the axioms and cultural expectations which are reflected in the material, and the type of ethics which exist in the subconscious of the individuals behind such productions, and our society more broadly. Ultimately, once again, while I think this is an enjoyable music video, I consider it to be a bit of a weird cultural artifact. But what do you think? Do you agree with what I've said here? Are you a fan of this song? And have I changed the way you perceive it? Let me know in the comments below. Leave a like if you want to, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.